Good afternoon, my dear friends. Once again, we are so happy to be here sharing our room with you all. And before presenting our guest speaker from the United States, talking to United Kingdom and the world, we start with a small prayer. We call our Jesus as a psychologist, and he will be with us, helping us to understand this beautiful topic and spread these teachings to everyone that will maybe later talk about it. Dear Master Jesus, we know the importance to be together, praying, that is prayer, clean our heart, our mind, and together we can spread love, understanding to the world, understand what's going on in our life, in our family, in our country, in humanity. So, dear Lord, may our blessing be with all of our friends that are watching today and watching later, and with our Flavio Zanetti that kindly accepted our invitation to talk to our teens, youth from 0 to 100 years old. Thank you, dear Lord, for this important. With your help, we start our live broadcast meeting today. Thank you.
Amen.
Flavio, welcome here. I
Thank
have the
you.
pleasure to present you. Flavio Zanetti is a dedicated worker from the Spiritist movement in the United States. Since 1999, he's working in Allan Kardec Spiritist Study Society of Massachusetts, director of the United States Spiritist Federation. He is one of the founder of the Spiritist Institute. He gave talks in Japan, Philippines, Netherlands, Belgium, Costa Rica, United Kingdom, and he's an engineer as a professional worker from Boston. He lives there and have two beautiful twin daughters, 7 years old. Now we have the pleasure to give our room to you, Flavio. Please.
Thank you, Elsa, so much for the kind introduction. I really wish we could be doing this live, face to face, but given the modern times that we live, right, we have to do this through technology. And thanks to technology, right, we're able to do this get together, right, through through Facebook and some other vehicles that we have out there. So welcome everybody. So glad to be here. So thankful, so grateful for the opportunity. And we have an amazing content prepared to share with you all today. So if you have questions, if you have comments, please feel free to submit them in the chat on Facebook. I believe this is not being streamed to YouTube, but just Facebook. Right? Elsa, I believe I'm hearing some return from you, some audio from you. So maybe you could mute yourself. That'll be better for the audience. That's awesome. Thank you. Anyway, so again, we have a great content prepared to share. I hope that your teens in spirit, right? Teens in not in only in age, can also benefit from going over this, right? So let me start by sharing a few slides here. Then we can continue. So, can you give me maybe a thumbs up on Facebook if you can see my screen? And I'm gonna start or else is gonna help us start sharing that in a minute. While that happens, right? Would love to get your input if you can see that on your screen. I believe you can, right? All right, I see some hands already. That's awesome. So, okay, the goal here, right, is to really tackle the role of the Spiritist team, right, in today's world. We don't have to say, extensively that we live in very interesting times, right? Today we live in unprecedented times. We're all sitting down in our homes, hopefully, right, going over this quarantine, doing our parts, thanks to COVID. We're going to touch on that in a minute, right? Why has God sent us COVID? That's a question that we heard before, or we received before, right? We're going to touch that in a minute, right? So, is the world going to end? Right? Some people may be asking that question. Is this the end of times? Right? People may be wondering what's going on, what's happening, right? We're going to touch on that as well. Again, the idea here is for us to come together and, in the light of Spiritism, in the light of the knowledge that we've acquired throughout studying, talking to our friends, right? How can we make sense of this very complex world? That's our purpose. That's our goal for this afternoon's activity in the UK, or for those of us in this side of the pond in the morning, right? That's the goal here. All right, so let's get started. If you are a teenager, right, can you tell me, the screen is going to change in a couple of seconds. Can you tell me, or can you think, what is the sport that I'm sharing on the screen? And I know there's a small delay in the connection, so we're going to wait until I can see here, or if you can see it already, right? What is the sport that you can see on the left? I hope you can see that, right? So for those of you wondering what is the sport, that's Formula One, right? So this car here that's flying over all the other cars, that's a Williams, right? It's a Rothman's Williams car, right? It's an English car. So the analogy that I'm going to use for the teenagers, right? That's you and your brains. What do I mean by that, right? If you are a teenager, right, your brain works or races at 200, 320 kilometers an hour or 200 miles an hour. That's the speed that these cars can go to, right? So imagine you as teenagers going 320 kilometers an hour, super fast, but all of a sudden, guess what? You don't have enough brakes. Oops, right? I don't have enough brakes. What happens when we don't have enough brakes? Some crashes end up happening, like this one here, right? You can't stop in a proper distance, you just crash, right? So that, in an analogy, it's your brain, folks. That has been our brains when we go through adolescence years, right? We really want to go fast. We want to do more. We want to conquer, finish the race, change the world, right? Do all these amazing things. But all of a sudden, we may not have enough brakes. That is exactly how the brain of a teenager works, according to Thomas Armstrong, who wrote this book, The Power of the Adolescent Brain, Strategies for Teaching Middle and High School Students, right? And that's exactly what we see when we work with teenagers, when we go back in time, and, not many years ago, I'm sure, we go back into our own adolescence years, then we see, what happened when I was 13, 14, 15, 17, 18 years old? As a matter of fact, if we go back to the word teenager, right, that word came from the age group that ends in teens. So starting with 13, 14, 15, all the way up to 19 years of age. So that was the original term that coined the meaning of teenager, right? Teen-ager. But according to Thomas Armstrong as well, the idea is that the world is changing, right? We are not living in a world that, our parents or grandparents lived. This is a huge moment of transition, right? Our traditional values are put into check. For example, right? Many, many years ago, smoking was the norm, right? Whereas today, if you ask, if you see somebody that smokes, right? You probably say, dude, or mate, I should say, right? If you in the UK, what are you doing? This is just wrong, or it's bad. Or not only is scientifically proven that's not healthy, but it's also it's bad. I mean, nobody does that anymore. So when you look at that from that perspective, right, we see that the world is changing and our traditional values are put into check. When you look at that from a technology knowledge perspective, it changes or it doubles every 2 years. What do I mean by that, right? So if you're in 7th grade, right, and then you go to 9th grade, right, the amount of knowledge that you have, it's twice as much, right? So imagine all the information that you see or have when you're in ninth grade versus the one that you see or had when you're in seventh grade, right? Double or twice as much. So that's significant, right? Going back to our Formula One analogy, our brains are so fast, or the teenager brains go so fast that we can really keep up with all those things that are happening, right? With that being said, information is power, right? The more we have, the more knowledge that we have, the more we know, right? The more power that we have. And this is where we do, or that this is what I usually do when we're having this conversation live, right? We ask the question, do you want to have power? Do you want to be powerful? And the answer always is, sure, why not? Or yes, absolutely, right? So when we see this, right? If you want to be powerful, if you want to have power, the way that you can really know more about yourself, more about the world, right? There's only one way through that, which is information, which is through knowledge, right? But with also if you stitch with what we have with COVID, right? Why is that important to have information? Why is that important to have knowledge? Because with all this fake news out there, the more we know about it, the more equipped we are, the more tools we have, right, to tackle it, to live through it, right? That's why it's really important to follow, right, what the experts are saying, the epidemiologists, the medical doctors, and the scientists in general are recommending for COVID, right? That's why we're home. Hopefully, everybody's is doing this or following us through the comfort of their homes, right? We're quarantined in our own houses, and then, as I mentioned before, I hope you can really pick up where we left before. Imagine if we were in our homes 40, 50 years ago, right? Whereas no smartphones were available, no Netflix binge watching, right? No Kindle, nothing was there. So, as we know, we're in much better shape now than we were before. That's why the prosperity is there. There's so much prosperity now that before wasn't even possible, wasn't even available. So when you look at that, right, the world is much more advanced now than it was before, right? That's one information I wanted to leave you guys out there. But the question, right, it's still there. Why does God, allow COVID to happen? That's the question that we received from some fellow teenagers, right? Why has God allowed COVID to happen? And that's a question we want to go back to the Spirits book and some other, literature that we have when we talk about pandemics, right? When we talk about situations where, what we have going on right now are there. So if we go back in the history of humankind, every time we have these pandemics, every time we have these massive, diseases or problems or health situations, right? The world leaves or comes out of that much more advanced, much more progress to it, right? So once again, there is a benefit with everything that happens. And one thing that's important to mention, right, is that nothing happens by accident. Everything is under control, right? God knows what's happening, right? We know that, right? God knows everything that's happening. And so to think that God wouldn't allow this to happen, or it would be against God's will, right? It's very small from our mind. It's very limited thought process from our minds, as we learn from Spiritism, right? As we learn from the knowledge that we get from Spiritism. So with that being said, right, everything happens for a reason. We may not know all the reasons yet, but if you can make a comparison with the other pandemics, right, the Spanish flu, H1N1, the SARS, all those other situations, the Asian tsunami, and all these major catastrophes, right, that had happened in the past, we see that the world comes out of it, or our planet comes out of it, much more advanced with much more progress, right? That's one of the areas that we want to touch, right? And follow with you guys. So when you look at that, right, and you add on to the fact that we live in this hyper-connected world, right? And if you are a parent, right, I'm pretty sure you may not know all these apps. And if you do, that's kudos, that's congrats to you. But if you are an adolescent or if you're a teenager, likely that you know all these apps, right? So one thing that I would say, it's important to have apps. As I said, we live in the much more advanced, time right now than before, right? Um, and these apps, they make us, right? They help us, right? So for example, they help us stay connected. We're doing this over Facebook, right? They help us really get more knowledge. That's Kindle. They help us really call our friends. It's WhatsApp, and share videos and share photos and make connections and really stream live. And YouTube, right? It's the new television. You know, Snapchat is how we sometimes share videos and images with our friends and folks that we love and all that. But the rule of thumb, or the question, I better say, the question I have for all of us, right? Are all these apps good? Do they all help? And I wanted to bring in a golden rule for apps, if I could, right? So, what is the golden rule for apps? It's very simple, right? If you're a teenager, hey, should I, use that app, or should I use that other app, or what are the things that should go? It's a very simple golden rule for apps, right? Stop and think: is the app giving me truth, or is it true that this app is what it's doing to me, right? Is it helpful? The information that I'm getting through that app, is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary, right? Is it kind? And if you meet all these think rule of thumb items or categories, you can very well use the app and continue doing that, right? So that's my real golden rule for apps for teenagers and for parents, all that. So if you're a parent, guess what? Your son or daughter is using some of these apps. So it's also important for you as a parent to know what your son or daughter is looking, watching, seeing, gaining information from, right? We get that. So let me change the gears a little bit, right? And talk about who is the adolescent, right, today. So if you look at that, right, you probably one in the middle. You see this person in the middle, right? That's you, not on the right, not on the left, right? And I apologize for the animation that did not work here. So if I move this down, right? So when you look at this from the spiritual perspective, right? Who is the adolescent? Adolescents, right? That's in the middle. That's us when we lived as the adolescents in the middle, right? It's part of a process, right? It is part of a journey, right? We were, babies at one point. We're, children at one point. We're teens now. We're going to be adults at one point, and finally we're going to be elderly, right? Folks at the end. But if you look at this from an explanation, what is or who is the spirit, right? That is the adolescence, right? Adolescent, right? Jonah the Angelus tells us that it's the phase in which the reincarnation is complete. Meaning, when you complete that phase, that means the incarnation is complete, right? It's the highest degrees of selfishness and generosity. And when I say this to the audience, Flavio, hang on a second, right? How is that even possible, right? Selfishness and generosity at the same time together? Yes, it is possible, right? That's how our brains are thinking, right? It's a lot of that is me, myself. I want to do this. I want to do that, right? I want to be better. I want to do this more than anybody. That's what every teenager, goes through, right? We know that. But at the same time, that sense of generosity is still there, right? That's why community service is at utmost high when you're a teenager. Not only because you have enough time in our hands, but because we feel the need to contribute. We feel the need to really change the world, right? As any adolescent, right, will think about. So when you look at that, the mindset of changing the world, right? The question that I have is, how can we change the world? Is it even possible for us to think that we can change the world? And usually folks say, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, do that. I'm going to go to my food bank. I'm going to do more charity. I'm going to help the homeless. All these great initiatives are awesome, by the way, right? But if you really want to change the world, there's only one way, folks. We have to change ourselves first. Because right, Gandhi used to say, right? We change the world by changing ourselves, right? we want to see the change in the world, but we want to see the change that we put into ourselves. So when we have that mindset, when you have that, you understand some of these conflicts or new social environment that our teenager, lives, right? Because it's no longer a child, really no longer a child, but it's not really an adult fully formed yet. And what that means, right, is that we're in that in-between stage, right? And then, as Allan Kardec mentioned from the Spirit's book, it's the spirit taking over its own nature, its own self. It's when we're really becoming, right, fully formed, or the process of reincarnation is really getting there, right? One of the questions that we saw, right, we heard from some of the teens, right? Oh, there's a lot of issues that teens face today, right? So I want to frame this in a way that Spiritist teens face today, because the issues are, guess what, the same, right? If you're a Spiritist teenager or not, the difference is Spiritism gives us this tools, or this tool bag that we can use to better make sense of this very complex world that we have out there, right? That's the difference. So some of the challenges or some of the issues that we see today, right, I'm going to change here because we're not doing any animation, right? One is cyberbullying, right? Cyber stalking. Those are two major issues that teenagers face today. By the way, when I was a teenager, that was not even available because we didn't have internet. I know, sounds crazy. No internet, no Netflix, no WhatsApp, no Instagram. But guess what? That's the world that we lived when we were teenagers, right? So when you look at that from that perspective, right, we're facing a lot more complex problems today than we faced when we were teenagers. And thankfully, Spiritism gives us, right, the tools that are needed for us to really tackle these difficulties, right? For us to tackle this. Also, if we look at that from hormones, emotions, the sexual, it's flourishing from our bodies, right? So we look at that and we see a lot of changes happening, right? A lot of situations are going through, right? We know that. And if we continue, right, there's still the pressure of grades. There's still the pressure of body image and self-esteem. I hope you like the picture there, right? Sometimes that's me looking at the picture. Oh my God, why am I so fat? Jesus, I gotta exercise more. I gotta do that. I'm sure we all go through this one point in life, right? Sometimes it's self-esteem, us not really giving true value for our own selves. That's also part of the challenge that teenagers face today. And utmost important, right? Broken homes. This is the reality that we live in, right? A lot more broken homes today versus in the past for several reasons. We don't want to get there, but when you put all these things into a pressure cooker, into a big blender, so to speak, right? The cyberbullying, cyber stalking, hormones, sex, emotions, grades, the pressure, the broken homes, the body image, right? Is it easy to be a teenager? Definitely not, right? Is it impossible to be a happy teenager? Definitely not, right? But then if you add two more dangerous, situations, or two more really, really, really tough ones, right, that we can say, and it's there, it's present today. What about drugs and alcohol, right? Studies show that if you're a teenager and you consume drugs or alcohol, remember, information, knowledge is power, right? These substances are going to do harm to your bodies, to your physical bodies, right? Even more so than if you were an adult, right? Also, the idea of desensitization of violence, right? We're not talking only about video games and the movies and everything else. That's why it's really, really important for us to have that, right, as a sense of filter from what we watch on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime and all these places, right? From the things that will be offered when we go to parties. By the way, it's healthy to go to parties. It's important to go dance and enjoy and sing. And, it's really important. Yes, it is. We know that, right? But it's also important to make sense of the life that we live. of the life that we're living, right? So one of the things that I'd like to mention, right, since we're talking about drugs, there is an effect, right, on drugs, and that is, right, it alters the sense of alertness, right, decreases physical pain, brings a hallucination. It really help. I mean, it really does brain damage. It may foster dependence and may drive uncontrolled behavior. Let's go back to the information or knowledge is power. If you put this, right, in an equation, this plus this equals all this, right? From a rational point of view, right? It's really, really important, right? That we understand the effects. And then if you go back to Paul of Tarsus, right? Everything is lawful for me, but not everything suits me. I mean, I'm not gonna talk bad about people that are in that situation. They have their own free will. God gives us, right, our own free will to make our own decisions, right? But at the same time, it's important to understand, right, what are the effects on these behaviors that we know. So if we keep moving forward, right, and really looking at the complexities of being an adolescent or being a teenager, right, as we learn from Spiritism, this progressive body of knowledge that teaches us, that really brings the gospel with different, really, ways of interpreting that, right? Everything happens for a reason, right? There's action and there's reaction, right? One of the questions that we got from you guys is, if God didn't want us to kill each other, why did he let us create weapons? And by the way, whoever asked that question, brilliant, right? Because it's a critical thinking that we all have, that Spiritism teaches us, invites us to have critical thinking, question, right? Don't just accept. By accepting it, we have to question. That's a great way to question that, right? Why did he let us create weapons? Because guess what? God does not interfere with our free will. We can do anything, right? Yes, everything is possible. Everything is lawful, as Paul of Tarsus mentioned, but not everything suits me. Meaning, I can create a weapon. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. But whatever happens to those, I am co-responsible. In the same way that whatever behavior I foster on others, guess what, right? Are also going to be responsible for the situations and everything else that happens to them. So if I bully others, right? All these things that we mentioned before, right? Everything that happens to them, we are co-responsible. So it is tough, folks. I mean, if you think about that, right? It is really important that we know, right? About action and reaction. Everything is under God's eyes, God's control. At the same time, God does not interfere into our own free will, right? And at the same time, we have everything that we need in order to be happy, to be successful. And if we do a small situation analysis from where we are, right? These are all good friends, drinking coffee, talking to each other, and at the same time collaborating, right? Via technology. We know that, right? And then I wanted to bring an important comment by Albert Einstein in this next slide here that talks about the fear. He feared the day the technology surpassed human interaction. Guess what? We're already there, folks, right? So Einstein's fear is already there, right? So oftentimes we go have coffee with friends and we just don't leave our devices, right? Sometimes we go to the beach with our family or with our friends. We're still in our devices. We go watch a game, a soccer, football, rugby, or whatever, right? We're still plugged in with our devices, right? We go on a date with our loved one. What happens? We're still, right, plugged in with our devices, right? We're enjoying some sights. I'm not sure if you can see the bottom, middle picture here, right? We're still, again, technology is important. Devices make us get connected with each other, like this one here. It's really, really important. But at the same time, right, human interaction is the most important thing that we have in this world, this life. And I truly believe that with COVID, remember, everything happens for a reason. With COVID, is making us remember that. So you know what? I can't take that for granted that one time, right, that in the past, I had this, or I see this, or I should be seeing that and all that. So when you look at that from that perspective, right, it's really, really important for us to make the situational analysis and understand what Spiritism teaches us, right? Because if we don't interact with each other, if we don't spend time with each other, right? Guess what? Conflicts will come up. The difficulties, right, will come up, right? And that's exactly what Joanna the Angelus talks to us about, that the root cause of all evil that afflicts the current world is the absence of a more spiritualized view of life. When you look at that, right, what does she mean by spiritualized view of life? Does that mean that I have to go to my Spiritist center 7 days a week? I have to go to my church or my temple 7 days a week, maybe twice on Sunday? No, right? It's of course it's important to go and learn and gather with friends and all that, but it's not even more important to live a spiritualized life all the time. Because as we learn from Spiritism, right, nothing happens by accident. Nothing happens by accident, right? And this life, right, we have only one portion of our much bigger life. If we do an analogy with the Netflix series, this is only one chapter of one series that we have from our lives, our spiritual lives, right? So it's important to live that spiritualized life all the time. Understand action and reaction. Leverage the tools that we get from Spiritism, right? Understand all these things combined are going to help us be better teenagers, better adults, better sons and daughters and parents and cousins and all that, right? So, but I'll change gears a little bit here. That even though we have a new life, a different life, right? There's still an issue today that really surrounds all of us, which is prejudice and discrimination, right? And if you don't believe that exists, right, you may be living on a different planet. You may be here only on vacation, not really living here, because everywhere we look, we see that, right? It's the new versus the old. And one of the questions that we received from some of you folks, right? What God lets us, live in different situations, right? What is it? Why do we have people with different skin colors or skin tones and genders? Why we have so much difference in the world, right? And one of the answers that we see from the Genesis by Allan Kardec and the Spirit's book is that every time we live with people that are different than us, we learn so much. Because if we only lived with folks that are just like us, right, we already have that experience. You want an example, right? I'll give a couple of examples. It's really impossible for me as a male or as a mate, as a guy, right, to understand the concept of giving birth to a child. In this incarnation, I'll never be able to do that, right? Same way that, for you girls or women, right, there is one situation where it's very impossible, very difficult, right, for you to understand. You want to see what that is? There's one. Yes, there is one. And I'll tell you right now. So next time you go to your refrigerator, not now, just wait a little bit, go to your refrigerator and you see that, the pickle jar or the jar that has maybe, hearts of palm or any one of those, glass jars, right? That's why usually guys are there for. I know. It should have been a joke, maybe a very bad one. I get that, right? But then my father-in-law came and visited us a while ago, and he brought us a tool, one of those tools that really puts down the lid and then reduces the pressure, and any 5-year-old can open the jar. And I told my father-in-law, I said, seriously? You removed my most important job in the house as a husband? Anyways, long story short. So going back to the topic here, right? Racism is not a crime, right, to be human. So everybody is different. We all know that. Everybody has different, mindsets. And again, race is just a social concept that people created, right? So if you look at that from the spiritual perspective, right, what has God allowed us to really be born with different skin tones? We can do a scientific approach of that because we used to live in different parts of the world, right? That's how the humans, right, ended up being more adapted to places with more sun, less sun, and all that. That's the scientific component of why we have different quote unquote races or skin tones or skin colors, right? But how to deal with that, right? How to see a fellow human being that's different than us as a brother, as a sister, as a sibling, right? We know that, right? How to do that. And I'm going to use an analogy that it's going to match one of the questions that we received, right, from some of you guys, beforehand, right? Why does God let autism to happen? And if you look at the Spiritist literature, right, that we have access to, there's several cases where we see, right, literature that talks about autism. And one of the great stories that I remember that Joanna de Angelis talks to us about, right, was this person, right, back 67 years ago, right? Imagine if you were, white 70 years ago, right, or 80 years ago, either in the United States, Brazil, whatever it is, right, in the UK or whatnot. And then you're from a very affluent family, and you're white, right? And then all of a sudden you fall in love with a black woman. Okay? Your parents don't want to let you do that because they think it's not appropriate for an affluent white person to fall in love with a black girl, right? That lives in the outskirts of the city and whatnot. So what do? The parents do whatever they can to block that. Okay? And you feeling all that pressure, and we sometimes in that situation, we can't really cope with that and ended up committing suicide. Okay? That's a story. It's a very tragic story that Joanna de Angelis talks to us about, right? What happens? By committing suicide, right? And I know this is not a suicide, topic here, but just bear with me for a second, right? And then in the next life, right, by God's mercy, you were born with autism. By God's mercy, again, everything happens under God's eyes, right? God knows everything and controls everything. By God's mercy, you were born in a family with autism because you did some damage to your brains. But oftentimes, the trial with an autistic, kid is not really for the autistic kid. It's for the parents. Guess what? The parents are the ones that put a lot of pressure on you, that drove you to really commit that behavior. Remember what we said before, right? Everything that we do to others, we're co-responsible. Everything that we share, that we do, the guns and the drugs, everything that we do, right? And then others have behaviors because of that, we are co-responsible, right? Simply the fact that teenager wanted to love the person that he loved in that example. And his parents would not let him do that, right? And then thanks to reincarnation, thanks to divine justice, that new situation arises. Whereas the parents have to really take care of their autistic kid. When you look at that, right, we shouldn't be thinking about racism any longer because with Spiritism, right, with reincarnation, we can be born in every skin color possible, right? In every situation, in every single, right? So as we know that. Let me share with you, and for the folks that are watching us here, right? I'd like for you to think about. I know you can, sometimes if you can write some comments here, right? What do you see in this picture? That's my question to you. In every situation, I don't know what that was, but so what do you see in this picture? That's a question that I have for you, right? A lot of times when I ask this question live, folks say a gay couple or gay parents, right? You know what I see when I look at this picture? You know what I'd like to see? I'd like to have everybody see when they look at this picture? A happy family, right? If you did not think about this as a happy family, guess what? We still have some prejudices, some discrimination embedded into our brains. Is it our fault only? No, it's because the society that we live, it's because the place that we live, right? They drive us to see that. They drive us to think in that frame of mind, right? But the moment you remove that from the situation, the moment you move away from that, right? You can really understand from a spiritual perspective, that's just a happy family, like any other one, right? So when you look at that, you really understand, right? The pillars of the Spiritist action, right? As we learn from Spiritism, right? Everybody has to work in our prejudices, work in the way we talk to others, work in the way that we work in our families with solidarity, tolerance from some of the differences that we have, tolerance from some of the different thoughts, right? As Lavoisier, the great Frenchman that used to say, I may not agree with your point of view, but I will defend up to my life if it's necessary for you to have a different point of view. Because that's okay to have different points of view. That's fine, right? And the one thing that I'd like to think that the reason why God lets us live with people that are different than us is because we can learn so much, right? We can learn so much from people that are different than us, right? In a way that when you look at these different situations, when you look at these different ways of living, right? It really shows one thing only. It shows that God is love, and God is present every single place that we go. God is inside of us. God is everywhere, as we know. God is love, and there's nothing outside of God. So when you put all these things into an equation, right, and we use the phrase that Allan Kardec gave us, that without charity there's no salvation, right? Folks, that's the recipe for happiness. That's the recipe for every teenager to do well in life. For every teenager, right? To really be successful. And I'd like to share a video. I hope I can do that. Maybe, I won't crash the system here, but I'd show a video from Denmark that they share something very, very interesting. Let me see if I can play here so you guys can at least hear it, right? Let's see if it works.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn?
I don't think it's working. I just heard that folks were mentioning it's not working, the video. But anyways, I can share the link with the video, and then you can watch it later. So essentially, right, this is a commercial from the Danish television where they really, show everybody. They may look different. They might, behave differently, right? They may see each other as different. But at the end of the day, right, we're all the same. At the end of the day, we are all the same, folks. We're spirits created by God, right, with one destiny in mind, which is to be happy. And adolescence is a fantastic place, or a fantastic time frame, I should say, for us to really conquer or finish the transition from being a child to being an adult, right? And we should be thankful for the opportunity. We should really take that with both of our arms and really move forward, right? In order to become a good citizen, a good person, a good spiritist, if we're so following spiritism, right? Whatever it is that we see and have as values from our lives, right? That's what we should aspire. That's what we should move towards. Again, this is an amazing video. I'm sorry it didn't work for you guys, but again, I really hope that this message drove home the fact that we're all in this together, that nothing happens by mistake, right? And there is a purpose for all of us. There is a purpose for all of us in life. So thank you. I see the video is fine, But let's try it again. See if it works. Let's see. Yeah, you can't see the captions.
Bonusforældre.
Who are step parents? He's asking. He's asking some very private questions from folks.
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance.
I like to dance.
We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted.
Oh.
We who are madly in love.
Oh, so cute.
We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
It's a very emotional video because it touches all aspects of life, right? I see some goosebumps, folks mentioning goosebumps in the stream here, right? It touches all of us because at the end of the day, folks, we're all the same. At the end of the day, we are spirits trying to do our best to be better kids, better parents, better friends, better bosses, better workers, better spiritist workers, better presenters for you guys, better audience when we listen or watch a presentation, right? We're all on this together. And if we really, embrace ourselves, if we really work together, right, the journey will be much easier. So my question to you is, or my ask for you, my request, I should say, in proper English for you is, right, be thankful for the opportunity that you have to be a teenager in today's world. Be thankful for your parents, for your friends, for your schools, and use this moment that we live today, quarantined in our houses, right, to reflect upon what's the reason for all this and come out of this stronger, more happier, right, more prepared for the future. That's what I have planned to share with you guys today. I'm so terribly sorry for technical difficulties that we had before. I hope you can really stitch the videos, the first part, the second part together. And I'd love to answer any questions you may have. We have a few more minutes, Elsa, I believe, right? I'm here. Reach out, friend me on Facebook, right? I'm more than happy to assist and happy any way I can. Thank you, folks.
Flavio, as I was preparing before, advertising this talk, so a lot of people pop questions and sent to me that I cannot find it now. But as far as I remember, one is how to prepare to be a good parent for teenagers. This is a parent that is asking because they have difficulty to talk, to have a dialogue, to immerse in the world of the teenager.
Okay. Couple of things that I can think of, right? So education or educating a child or a teenager is a great, utopian activity because you're all going to learn that, you're going to teach, and oftentimes it will not work. I'm sorry to say that, right? Oftentimes it would not work. Oftentimes you do whatever you can, you're going to be there, and then 15, 20 years later, it's like, oh my God, did not work. That did not work. But then later and later in life, your son or daughter does something, oh my God, he or she actually learned all that teaching back then, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though you may think it's not working, the results or the product, it's only down the road that you see it. It's like, planting a seed, right, in the ground for a big tree, like an oak or a pine tree. It's going to take 50 years for that tree to be flourishing and tall and big and strong, right? Same thing happens with us as parents, right? We may not see the result right away. It may be way, way down the road. Specifically for teenagers, if you are a teenager or if you have a teenager, you're looking for some advice. Again, I don't have this for my gain of cause because my daughters are not even 8-year-olds, right? But from what I've read from several books and watched authors and talks and all that, the one most important thing to do when you're talking or teaching a teenager is try to really put ourselves in the shoes of a teenager. Because life is hard for a teenager. I shared some examples, right? The bullying and the stalking and the drugs and the alcohol, the pressure, self-esteem, and all these things are there pressing, right, that teenager. So if we don't really acknowledge that, if we don't put ourselves in the shoes of our kids or teenagers, it's going to be very difficult for us to connect with them. It'll be very difficult for us to really be effective in having that conversation, right? Oftentimes what teens want is for you to be there for them, right? Because a lot of knowledge, a lot of information they get online. They get through YouTube and those apps that I mentioned before, and schools and friends, right? They're not expecting you to be a PhD in physics. If you are, that's great. Or a PhD in psychology or sociology or social psychology. No. What they expect you is to be there for them, right? To pick them up when they fall, to hug them if they need a hug, to sit down with them and cry if they're crying because they're broken heart. And if you don't remember, when you were a teen and somebody dumped you, right? A girl or a boy dumped you, right? You thought that the world was going to end. Didn't you? I did a couple times. So when we go back in that, it's like, oh my God, my son, daughter is really suffering because he or she thinks the world's going to end. But at the same time, right? The world's not going to end. It's a challenge, a difficulty that we have what we need to get there. And one more thing I'll say, do you guys know that the example, right? The role model is not the best way to teach? Do you know that? Being a role model is not the best way to teach somebody. It is not. You may be thinking, Flavio, are you crazy? It's not. What's the best one then? It's not the best because it's the only one. It's the only one. So, if you say, and do something else, you're wasting your time. I'm sorry, folks, you're wasting your time, right? You could say less and do more because children and teenagers are going to follow us as role models. They're going to follow what we do, not only at what we say, okay? So, question here, how to introduce Jesus as a psychologist to our teens to accept to learn about Jesus. So again, I'm not a psychologist by training, right? My wife studied psychology, not me. One thing that I can say is that Jesus was the utmost psychologist that ever lived, right? And I believe I forgot the name of the author that wrote that book, Jesus as the utmost psychologist, right? Or the most important psychologist, something like that. So one thing that's important to say to our kids is Jesus is always there for us. He's a big brother, right? He's a big sibling that's always there for us. Whatever we need, he's there for us. How do we get closer to him? By learning what he said, what he did, right? How do we learn what he said, what he did? Spiritism gives us that path. other religions, other philosophies. Oh, I don't want to be religious. Okay, that's fine. Look for some other philosophies that can really get back to you. Because remember, everything starts from God. Everything is under God's control. There are other philosophies out there that are amazing. That talks about really being nice to others, really being a good, human being and all that. So the moment we understand that, and we see Jesus as the role model and guide, I'm gonna ask, why, what do I do if I'm facing a very difficult situation? What do I do? What did Jesus did when he was facing the same situation? So if I can get back to that, I can maybe get an idea, an example, and I can maybe not follow 100%, but maybe 80%, 70%. That's a huge step forward already. The moment you understand that, folks, life becomes a lot easier. Life becomes a lot lighter from our shoulders, right? And COVID and all these and problems and difficult, they're all going to be there. Because guess what? Those are tests that we're being given in order to excel on them. It's like going back to high school all over again, right? A math test or a physics test, right? I mean, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to go by this. But then you leave the test, you feel much better. Oh yeah, I did okay. Maybe I got an A plus or a B plus or an A minus, whatever it is, right? But if we rely on Jesus' teachings, life becomes a lot more easy, a lot easier, a lot more simple, a lot simpler, right? A lot more, a lot lighter, right, so to speak, for us to carry on. Hope that was helpful. Could you say something for young people that are stressed and upset during quarantine? So I'd like to invite you to go back 60 years ago. Imagine if this happened 60 years ago, okay? I mentioned before, no Netflix, no smartphones, no cell phones, so to speak, let alone smartphones, right? So I would have to wait for a specific time for the program to start, right? So it would be a lot more difficult way back then than it is now. This is a moment for reflection, folks, right? This is a moment that we have to spend more time with our families, right? This is a moment that the world or the universe is inviting us, okay, to be reflective, to take advantage of the time, to do something in the house, maybe fix something, maybe read a new book, play more sports in our backyards, or whatever it is that we can do, that we have access to. Let's take advantage of that. Let's work towards eliminating the stress. Can be stressful. I totally acknowledge that. Can be very stressful. But let's use the moment from a learning opportunity. Let's use that moment for us to really come out of this stronger, right? Come out of this more focused, more connected. As Joanna the Angelus said, right? The moment we live more spiritualized lives, our problems disappear in a way that our importance that we give to our problems are different, right? Let's say that in a different way. Our problems are not going to go away. They're all going to be there because we need them to be better, to overcome them, to really fight them, right? But the way we see them will be different. Will be totally different, right? And that's also another way to reduce the stress that we have today. By the way, I know it's not easy, right? I know it's difficult, but what do we need to do to come out of this stronger? As I mentioned before, we're living in this moment of transition, right? The world's changing, the world's evolving. How do we need to do to come out of this stronger, right? One more question here. From my teen, his mom sent WhatsApp. Why did God send us COVID? I mentioned this in the beginning, right? I'm going to repeat that again. All these pandemic situations, and we can see that from literature from Joanna the Angelus, literature from other Spiritist authors, right? Every time we go through a pandemic, every time we go through some major difficulties, right? So if you remember, we had the tsunami in Asia, right? We had major diseases, SARS, H1N1, and all these things. Every time we see this, we see at the other side of it, right? More progress. We see the advancement of technology, the advancement of folks really going out there, volunteering, right? It's really an endeavor that helps Earth come out of this stronger, like maybe a step or two closer to a world of regeneration, as we learned from Spiritism. But keep in mind, right? COVID and any other disease that we have out there, of course, you have to follow the guidelines of the scientists. Of course, you have to follow, right, all the directions and all that. But let us not forget that Jesus is at the helm of all this. And he's got a huge amount of spirits, workers that are helping us, are helping this planet, are helping all of us come out of this stronger. Come out of this, right? More victorious. Come out of this, right? More centered in our spiritualized life, as I mentioned. I can sense, oh, Flavio, yeah, it's great, but what about, my grandpa who perished, who died because of COVID? I know it is difficult, right? I can imagine how tough that may be, right? I lost, quote unquote, my mom passed away, last year. Took me a good couple of months, right? With all the Spiritist knowledge, with all the information that I have, access that I have in front of me, it took me a little while to overcome it. But guess what? We can overcome it. We have the tools, the technology, the resources, the people around us, right, to overcome this. If your loved one perished because of COVID, right, remember, we're going to see each other again, right? Might not be the next 50, 60 years, or it might even be through a dream or through mediumship. Who knows, right? That person did not cease to exist. The physical body did, but the spirit, all of us spirits, are immortal beings. And we're all going to be reunited again in the future. That gives a huge hope and consolation and comfort to all of us, right? I can really imagine and understand that, right? So if there are any other questions, I'll be happy to touch on them, Elsa. If not, I think we had a good amount of knowledge and topics to go over. One more. No, just a comment. So thank you so much for your patience to talk, even with this troubled moments before. Yeah, thank you sorry for the technical difficulties. Challenges come to be faced and overcome. Victorious, God bless us. These turbulent times will pass as well. And I'll close by, referring one of the most prolific mediums of all times, Francis Xavier from Brazil. And he lived a very modest life. And one of the things that he had on his, bed wall, right behind his bed, was a picture that showed saying that goes like this: everything will pass, or everything passes, I should say, right? Everything passes. This will pass. We will come out of this stronger, but we got to do our parts. All of us are in this together, as I mentioned, and we have to do our parts, right? So with that being said, I hope this has been helpful. Once again, apologies for the technical difficulties that we had in the beginning. If I can be of any help, friend me on Facebook, shoot me a note. Be more than happy to help you guys, right? If I can. And once again, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you, and I'm sending you all my love, right? Thank you so much. Elsa.
Yes. Flavio,
Any
thank
final?
you so much for your patience. Look, challenge is for us to teach something. We know the topic is very nice. There's a lot of teenagers cutting themselves, commit suicide, and we need to talk more for teenagers, bring them to the light, to understand that their life is beautiful, that they can overcome their own problems. Thank you so much. We will organize again without these troubled moments, okay?
Awesome.
And for that to ask you to do our open thank you.
Sure. So if you are sitting down, I'd like to invite us all to sit comfortably in our chairs. Close your eyes if you feel okay. A couple of deep breaths. trying to really sense the spiritual friends that are side by side with us, trying to really expand our physical bodies to really perceive and notice everything that's happening around us, all the love, all the care, all the help, all the assistance that we receive without interruption. And we'd like to thank our teacher, our professor, Jesus, the role and model for humanity, for all your teachings, oh Master Jesus, for all the knowledge that we have received. We thank you for Spiritism, this body of knowledge that gives us the tools that are needed for us to be better human beings. We thank all the benevolent spirits who are here with us, all of our guardian angels that have stayed with us, that are here with us, pumping us, driving us, pushing us to be better. And if we could ask you to send this prayer to our heavenly Father and Mother God, the creator of the universe, who knows everything, right? The supreme intelligence of the universe, in gratitude for once again this opportunity that we had to stay amongst friends, to share a few teachings, a few topics with our dear friends from all over the world that have joined us thanks to technology. We thank you for the opportunity. We thank you also for all the blessings we have received. And we also thank you, dear God, for all the difficulties, the problems, and the COVID, everything that we're facing right now. We thank you for those, because we do know that they are going to help us be better, get better, be better human beings, and get a little closer to you, our dear Lord. Once again, we thank you. And if we could ask once again for you to stay with us all the time, no matter what, ever and ever again, so be it. Amen.